Well, there's no doubt this has been a challenging time for many Australians, and a shout out to Victorians. Lockdown 4.0, I tell you what, we're only halfway there. We're all separated, many of us, from friends and family by border restrictions and the other lockdown measures, restrictions, and all the general mayhem, and confronting challenges stemming from unemployment and a downturn in the economy as well. But for some people, this isn't the worst challenge they've faced, and one New South Wales MP wants to tell their stories.
This podcast series is called Getting a Grip. I've called it Getting a Grip because I often say to myself when I'm facing hard times, get a grip, man, get some perspective. The purpose of the podcast series is to remind us that as Australians we faced adversity before and we can get through it. Liberal
MP Julian Leeser is the member for Berowra in New South Wales, but he's in the Federal Parliament. He joins me now. Julian, I have to say firstly, I think this is a phenomenal idea. I love the title, Get a Grip. I think interviewing people who've had all of these challenges and hopefully inspiring us to get through, what we're all finding, I think, a bit tough at the moment. What made you come up with this idea?
Well, I think it really was seeing people react to COVID. It's such a sort of strange scenario for many people. I'm 44 and I've never really faced a major challenge like this in my life. Most people of my generation and younger have never faced a major challenge like this in our lives. And it made me think about my grandfather. My grandfather was a POW in Changi. He was on Burma Railway, and he survived those terrible things and came back to Australia and opened up a hardware store, which he'd used that time while he was over there, suffering that extraordinary challenge, that extraordinary experience. And he channeled that experience into what he thought the future would be like. My grandfather was an ordinary person. The 5 people that I've interviewed here are pretty ordinary people, but they faced some extraordinary circumstances. And I wanted to really explore what is it in the Australian spirit, what is it when we face challenges that helps us get through those challenges. I think a lot of it is about the choices that we make. Yes, the news that we hear every day is tough. This is a virus where people are getting sick, they're dying, and it has major economic impacts. But if people concentrate constantly on the barrage of the negative rather than thinking about the choices that they can make, thinking about how they can get through it on a daily basis, then they won't use the time properly. And I think one of the things that's inspired me about the people I've spoken to in this series is the way in which they've confronted challenges and come through and demonstrated resilience. It says there's something in all of us that can get through the present challenges that we face.
It is such a good reminder. I'm stuck at home at the moment, so I can't do anything, right? Lockdown in Melbourne's pretty tough. So I'm doing all the jobs that you put off and reading the books that you've always intended to read and you haven't. And your point there about your father, did you say it was your father in Changi? Grandfather in Changi. Yeah, I always think, when I'm doing it tough, my great-grandmother had 6 sons on the Western Front and in the war in Europe, in the Great War. Now, to have 6 sons away and no modern communications as they had back then, that's what resilience is all about. You've interviewed, I'm told, a victim of a terror attack and other people that worked on the front line during the AIDS crisis. Tell me some of their stories.
Adelaide Stratton is a remarkable young woman who was injured in the Nice terror attack. She was doing what so many young Australians do. She went overseas on the holiday of a lifetime with friends to Europe. And there she was celebrating Bastille Day, where this truck came along and with a terrorist ran her over, killed hundreds of people and injured lots of people, including her. This is a woman who had a promising career in the media. She had a life plan. She suffered pretty terrible injuries and mental health issues alongside it. But she's kind of picked up and used this challenge really to help focus government policymakers, indeed, about what happens to terror victims overseas when they come back to Australia. That's how I initially met her when she came to see me. She's also now refocused her life. She was originally going to have a life in the media. Now she's going to become a teacher because of some of the experiences that she's had. I spoke to Julian Gold. Julian Gold was the Professor Brendan Murphy, if you like, of the AIDS crisis, the person who would come on our television screens on a nightly basis to talk about the number of people who got sick and the number of people who were dying of AIDS. And I thought
it was important to get a perspective about the last pandemic that we faced and how long it took us to find a way through it where people could live a normal life. The fear that occurred at the beginning and the important role indeed in his circumstances that fear played in encouraging the public to take these matters seriously. I interviewed a bloke who was engaged in a white extremist group, James Fry. He got involved in drugs and drinking, and a conversation one morning with his mother where she just said to him, "This isn't you," changed his life. And now he works with kids that are at risk. Another bloke, Matt Williams, served in the Australian Army, went to Afghanistan. In fact, Scott Morrison talked about him at his Anzac Day address. This is a bloke who'd always wanted to be in the Army. And he came home from his first tour of duty. He had a headache that he couldn't shake. And then he found himself with inoperable brain cancer. And rather than kind of rolling over and feeling sorry for himself, he's got involved in raising money for brain cancer. His Army mates have really stuck by him. And indeed, at the time I interviewed him a couple of months ago, he was still in the ADF. And that sense of purpose has been so important to him. The last interview was with somebody who's special to me, a woman called Jean Lindsay. She's also my wife's grandmother. She's 94. During the war, she grew up in Hong Kong and was sent out here to live with a friend in Australia. She was separated from her mother, who was taken prisoner in Hong Kong. During the entire war, they exchanged something like 50 words. She didn't really know whether her mother was alive or not. And just getting a sense of that spirit of the wartime generation, the way that they just got on with things, regardless of the challenges that were facing them. This is something that they bring, but it's also with the other examples I've shown something that is still in our Australian spirit. We can just get on with it. We can if we focus on the right things.
Well, I hope you're right. I hope the resilience is there under the surface, and we just need to encourage it out a bit. Where can we get the podcasts?
You can get it at all the usual places you get podcasts. You can get it on my website, julianleeser.com.au, and I encourage people to go and look for it.
Well, congratulations. I think this is a wonderful service. Julian Leeser, member for Berowra, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Peter.